I want the agency, the house, the car, the savings, all of it. You can keep your little dreams." Those were the words my husband Trenton said to me across the mediation table, his eyes cold and unflinching, like I was nothing more than an obstacle he needed to remove from his path. 12 years of marriage, 12 years of building something from nothing, and this was how it ended. With him taking everything I had worked for, everything I had sacrificed for, and walking away like I never mattered at all. But what Trenton didn't know, what he couldn't possibly know, was that in taking everything, he had just signed his own destruction, and I was about to let him do it, with a smile on my face. My name is Vivienne Ashford, but most people call me Viv. Before all of this happened, before my world fell apart and rebuilt itself into something I barely recognized, I was just a woman trying to make her dreams work. I started Ember & Company from my tiny apartment 7 years ago. It was just me, a laptop, and an idea that maybe, just maybe, I could help small businesses tell their stories in a way that mattered. I didn't have investors, or a business degree, or any safety net. What I had was passion, late nights fueled by cheap coffee, and a belief that creativity could change things. Those first 2 years were brutal. I remember eating ramen for dinner more nights than I care to admit, cold calling potential clients during the day, and designing campaigns late into the night. But slowly, painfully slowly, it started to work. Clients began to trust me. My campaigns started winning awards. And before I knew it, Ember & Company wasn't just surviving, it was thriving. Before we go any deeper into this story, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We would love to hear from you. And if you're new here, click on the subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Now, back to the story. I met Trenton during year 3. We met at a networking event where I was desperately trying to hand out business cards, and he was there representing some tech startup that eventually went under. He was charming, confident, everything I wasn't at the time. He made me laugh when I was stressed. He told me I was brilliant when I doubted myself. 6 months later, we were engaged. A year after that, married. In the beginning, Trenton was my biggest supporter. He would stay up with me during campaign launches, bring me dinner when I forgot to eat, and tell everyone he met about his wife, the creative genius. I loved him for that. I loved him for seeing me when I felt invisible to the rest of the world. But love has a funny way of blinding you to the things you should see clearly. Because while I was falling deeper in love with the man I married, I was missing all the signs that he was falling in love with something else entirely. Control. He would take calls with clients while I was in the middle of designing their campaigns. He would present my ideas in meetings as if they were collaborations, when really, I had done all the work the night before. He started telling people that we built the company together, conveniently forgetting that I had been doing this alone for years before he came along. But I convinced myself it was fine. We were married. What was mine was his, right? That's what partnership looked like. That's what love looked like. 3 years into our marriage, Trenton made a decision that would eventually change everything. He hired Celeste Breyer as a business partner. I remember the day he told me about her. We were having breakfast, and he slid her resume across the table like it was already decided. "She has experience with high-level accounts," he said. "We need someone like her if we want to scale." I looked at her credentials. They were impressive. Too impressive, actually. I couldn't understand why someone with her background would want to work for a boutique agency like ours. Something felt off, but when I voiced my concerns, Trenton dismissed them immediately. "You're being paranoid, Viv. We need help. You can't do everything yourself anymore." So I agreed. I welcomed Celeste into the company I had built, into the life I had created, and I watched as she took root like poison ivy, slowly choking everything beautiful around her. Celeste was everything I wasn't. Polished, assertive, the kind of woman who commanded attention the moment she walked into a room. She wore designer suits and expensive perfume and spoke with the kind of confidence that made people believe whatever she said. Within months, she had reorganized our entire client roster, brought in 3 major accounts, and somehow convinced Trenton that she should be handling the finances. I should have fought harder. I should have asked more questions. But by then, I was so tired of being talked over in meetings. Tired of watching Trenton and Celeste exchange glances that lasted just a second too long. Tired of feeling like a stranger in my own company, so I did what I do best. I retreated into the creative work. I let them handle the business side while I focused on campaigns and branding and design. It was easier that way. Less confrontation, less fighting, less everything. The night everything changed started like any other. It was a Thursday in late September around 9:30 at night. I had been at a client dinner that ran longer than expected. One of those exhausting events where you smile until your face hurts and pretend you're not counting down the minutes until you can leave. I was tired, my feet hurt, from wearing heels for 6 hours, and all I wanted was to go home, take a hot bath, and forget about work for a few hours. But as I was driving home, I realized I had left my laptop at the office. It had client files I needed for a presentation the next morning, files I couldn't afford to be without. So I turned the car around and headed back to the office, annoyed but resigned to the detour. The office building was dark when I arrived. Our agency occupied the 3rd floor of an older building downtown, the kind with creaky elevators and flickering hallway lights that always made me slightly uneasy at night. I used my keycard to get in, took the elevator up, and stepped into the quiet, shadowy space of Ember & Company after hours. The reception area was empty, the desks abandoned, everything still and silent in that eerie way that offices feel when no one is there. I walked toward my office, my heels clicking against the hardwood floor, each step echoing in the emptiness. That's when I heard it. A sound coming from the conference room at the end of the hall. A laugh, low and intimate. The kind of laugh that people share when they think no one else is listening. My heart started to pound. I told myself it was probably just the cleaning crew, or maybe someone from another company who had mistakenly come to the wrong floor. But deep down, in that terrible instinctive way that your body knows something before your mind catches up, I already knew what I was about to find. I walked toward the conference room, each step feeling heavier than the last, my hand trembling slightly as I reached for the door handle. And then I opened it. The scene before me seemed to freeze in slow motion. Trenton and Celeste, tangled together on the conference table, her designer blouse on the floor, his shirt unbuttoned and hanging open. They looked up at me with identical expressions of shock, like children caught stealing cookies. Except this wasn't innocent or forgivable or something we could laugh about later. This was the end of everything. I don't remember what I said. I think I might have made a sound, something between a gasp and a scream, but the details are fuzzy now, blurred by the sheer, overwhelming weight of what I was seeing. Trenton scrambled off the table, pulling his shirt closed, his face flushed with embarrassment or guilt, or maybe just anger at being caught. Celeste, on the other hand, barely seemed fazed. She calmly picked up her blouse and put it back on, her movements slow and deliberate, like this was just a minor inconvenience rather than the complete destruction of someone's life. Viv, Trenton started, his voice shaking. This isn't what it looks like. I almost laughed at that. The absurdity of it. The sheer stupidity of that sentence when the evidence was literally right in front of me. But I didn't laugh. Instead, I just looked at him, really looked at him, and realized I didn't know this man at all. Maybe I never had. I left without another word. I walked out of that conference room, out of the office, down the elevator, and into my car. I sat in the parking lot for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. I kept thinking about all the times I had ignored my instincts, all the times I had pushed down that little voice that said something wasn't right, all the times I had chosen to believe Trenton's explanations instead of trusting what I could see with my own eyes. And now here I was, sitting alone in a dark parking lot, my marriage shattered, my business compromised, my entire life unraveling in real time. I thought about calling my sister Bryn. I thought about going home and packing a bag. I thought about confronting them both and demanding answers. But instead, I just sat there, numb and hollow, wondering how I had been so completely blind. Trenton came home around midnight. I was sitting in the living room in the dark, still wearing my coat, still holding my car keys. He turned on the light and jumped slightly when he saw me there, like I was a ghost haunting our own home. "We need to talk," he said. And we did. For 3 hours, we talked, or rather, Trenton talked and I listened. He told me it had been going on for 8 months. He told me he never meant for it to happen. He told me that I had pushed him away, that I was always working, always tired, always unavailable. He told me that Celeste understood him in ways I never could. He told me that he was sorry, but maybe this was for the best. Maybe we had grown apart. Maybe it was time to accept that we wanted different things. And then, in the cruelest twist of all, he told me that he wanted a divorce. But not just any divorce, he wanted the business. "You're too emotional to run it properly," he said, his voice cold and clinical, like he was discussing a business transaction rather than the end of our marriage. "Celeste and I have plans to expand. We can take Ember and Company to the next level. You should focus on your design work, maybe freelance or something. It would be better for everyone." I stared at him in disbelief. This man, this person I had loved and trusted and built a life with, was now sitting across from me, telling me that I should hand over the company I had created from nothing, the company I had poured my heart and soul and countless sleepless nights into, the company that existed before he ever came into my life, and he genuinely seemed to believe he had the right to take it. That's when something inside me shifted. The numbness began to fade, replaced by something sharper, colder, more focused. If Trenton wanted everything, fine, he could have it. But he had no idea what he was really asking for. The next morning, I called my lawyer, Greer Whitman. Greer and I had known each other since college. She was sharp, ruthless when needed, and one of the few people I trusted completely. I told her everything. The affair, Trenton's demands, the way he was trying to push me out of my own company. I expected her to tell me to fight, to prepare for a long legal battle, to gather evidence and build a case. But instead she listened quietly, asked a few pointed questions, and then said something I didn't expect. "Before we respond to anything, I need you to do something for me. I need you to audit your company's finances. Every account, every transaction, everything. Hire a forensic accountant if you need to. I think there might be more going on here than just an affair." Her words sent a chill through me. "What do you mean?" I asked. She paused before responding. "Viv, people don't usually demand a business in a divorce unless there's a reason. And if Celeste has been handling your finances, well, let's just say I've seen this pattern before. Nothing good ever comes from it." I took Greer's advice. I contacted a forensic accountant named Quinlan Hayes, a quiet, methodical man with 20 years of experience uncovering financial fraud. I gave him access to everything: bank statements, client payment records, vendor invoices, tax documents, everything. And then I waited. It took Quinlan 2 weeks to complete his audit. 2 weeks of pretending everything was normal while Trenton moved his things out of our house and into an apartment he was now sharing with Celeste. 2 weeks of going into the office and seeing them together, watching them whisper and smile and act like they had done nothing wrong. 2 weeks of feeling like I was living in a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. And then Quinlan called me into his office and spread the results of his investigation across his desk like a hand of cards, revealing a rigged game. The numbers were staggering. Over the past 18 months, nearly $500,000 had disappeared from Ember and Company's accounts. Fake vendor invoices, payments to shell companies, wire transfers to offshore accounts. Celeste had been systematically embezzling money from my business, and Trenton had been helping her. Every signature, every approval, every transaction had his fingerprints all over it. But it got worse. Quinlan also discovered that several of our biggest clients had paid in full for campaigns that were never delivered. The money had vanished into those same offshore accounts, and now those clients were preparing to sue for breach of contract. The total liability, if those lawsuits went forward, would exceed $1.2 million. My company, the thing I had built from nothing, wasn't just struggling. It was a ticking time bomb of fraud and debt, held together by lies and false accounting. And Trenton wanted to take it from me. He wanted to own it, to put his name on it, to claim it as his own. I sat in Quinlan's office, staring at those documents, and for the first time in weeks, I smiled, because I finally understood exactly what I needed to do. The plan came together surprisingly quickly. I met with Greer and Quinlan in a small conference room at Greer's law office. The three of us huddled around a table covered in financial documents and legal briefs. "Here's what we know," Greer said, tapping her pen against her notepad. "Trenton and Celeste have committed serious financial crimes. Wire fraud, embezzlement, tax evasion. If we report this now, they'll both face federal charges. But here's the problem. If we report it now, before the divorce is finalized, the business will be seized as part of the criminal investigation. You'll lose everything anyway, and you'll spend years tangled up in legal proceedings trying to prove you weren't involved. I felt my stomach drop. So what do we do? I asked. Quinlan leaned forward, his expression serious. We let Trenton take the business. We let him sign the divorce papers, take full ownership, and assume all liabilities. And then, once he's the sole legal owner, we report everything to the federal authorities. He'll be the one holding the bag when it all comes crashing down. It was perfect, terrible and perfect, and exactly what Trenton deserved. But it required something incredibly difficult. It required me to give up, at least on the surface, to let Trenton think he had won, to sign over my company, my home, my savings, everything I had worked for, and watch him celebrate his victory. Greer looked at me carefully. Viv, this is going to be hard. You're going to have to sit through mediation sessions and let him tear you apart. You're going to have to stay calm while he gloats. You're going to have to let him think you're broken. Can you do that? I thought about it for a long moment. I thought about all the nights I had spent building Ember & Company, all the sacrifices I had made, all the dreams I had poured into something that was now contaminated by greed and betrayal. And then I thought about Trenton's face when he told me I was too emotional to run my own business. I thought about the way he and Celeste had looked at me in that conference room, like I was an inconvenience they had to deal with. Yes, I said quietly, I can do that. The next 18 weeks were some of the hardest of my life. We went through mediation, sitting across from each other in a sterile conference room while lawyers argued over assets and timelines. Trenton was calm, confident, almost smug. He had already mentally moved on, already started planning his future with Celeste and my company. Every session he made new demands. The house, the cars, the savings accounts, the business, even some of my personal belongings that he claimed had sentimental value. And every session, I agreed. I watched his lawyer draw up paperwork transferring everything into his name. I watched Trenton sign document after document, his signature bold and confident, the signature of a man who believed he had outsmarted everyone, and I said nothing. I played my part perfectly. The defeated wife, the woman too broken to fight back, the creative dreamer who couldn't handle the harsh realities of business. I let them believe I was giving up because I had no other choice. My friends and family were confused by my behavior. My sister Bryn called me almost every night, begging me to fight back. Viv, you can't just let him take everything, she would say, her voice thick with frustration and worry. This is your life. This is your company. You built that from nothing. How can you just walk away? I wanted so badly to tell her the truth, to explain what was really happening. But Greer had warned me that the fewer people who knew, the better. If word got out about what we were planning, if Trenton or Celeste caught even a whisper of it, they would destroy evidence and disappear. So I kept quiet. I let Bryn think I was being weak. I let my mother believe I was making a terrible mistake. I let everyone around me watch as I signed away my entire life, piece by piece, day by day, and I counted down the hours until it would all be over. The final hearing was scheduled for a Wednesday morning in late November. It was cold that day, the kind of bitter cold that seeps into your bones and makes everything feel sharper, more real. I wore a simple black dress, no jewelry, my hair pulled back in a neat bun. I looked like I was going to a funeral. In a way, I suppose I was. The funeral of my marriage, the death of the life I thought I was building. We sat in the courtroom, Trenton on one side with his lawyer, and Celeste beside him, me on the other side with Greer. The judge reviewed the settlement agreement, asking standard questions to confirm we both understood what we were signing. Trenton answered confidently, his voice steady and sure. Yes, Your Honor. I understand. Yes, Your Honor. This is what we both want. When it was my turn, I kept my answers short and quiet. Yes, Your Honor. I understand. I'm ready to move forward. The judge had us sign the final documents. I watched my hand move across the page, my signature flowing in familiar loops and curves. With each signature, I transferred ownership of Ember & Company, the house we had shared, the savings accounts I had built, everything. Trenton signed his copies with barely concealed satisfaction, glancing over at Celeste with a small smile. The judge stamped the documents, declared the divorce finalized, and wished us both well in our future endeavors. It was done. Trenton now owned everything, and I owned nothing. We stood to leave, and for just a moment Trenton caught my eye. He didn't say anything, but his expression said it all. He had won, I had lost, and he was moving on to bigger and better things while I faded into irrelevance. I gave him a small, sad smile and turned to walk out of the courtroom. Greer squeezed my hand as we left. 24 hours, she whispered. Just hold on for 24 more hours. That night, I stayed at Bryn's apartment. I couldn't bear to be alone. Couldn't bear to sit in silence with my thoughts and my choices and the weight of everything I had just given away. Bryn made dinner, tried to comfort me, told me that things would get better eventually. I nodded and pretended to believe her. Around 9 o'clock, my phone rang. It was Quinlan. It's done, he said simply. The reports have been filed with the federal authorities. The investigation is officially open. They'll be making contact with Trenton within the next 24 to 48 hours. I thanked him and hung up. Bryn looked at me curiously. Who was that? She asked. I took a deep breath, and then I told her everything. The embezzlement, the offshore accounts, the fake invoices, the plan to let Trenton take ownership so he would assume all legal liability. I told her about Quinlan's investigation and Greer's strategy, and the fact that federal agents were, at this very moment, preparing to bring charges against the man who thought he had just won everything. Bryn stared at me in shock. You've been planning this the whole time, she whispered. I nodded. The whole time. The call came 36 hours after the divorce was finalized. I was at a coffee shop, trying to work on some freelance design projects, when my phone buzzed. It was an unknown number. I answered hesitantly. Is this Vivienne Ashford? A male voice asked. Yes, I replied. This is Special Agent Morrison with the Federal Bureau of Investigation. We need to ask you some questions regarding Ember and Company and the financial transactions that occurred during your ownership of the business. My heart started to race, but I kept my voice steady. Of course, I said. I'm happy to help in any way I can. We understand that as of 2 days ago, you are no longer the owner of Ember and Company. Is that correct? That's correct, I confirmed. The business was transferred to my ex-husband Trenton Ashford as part of our divorce settlement. There was a pause on the other end of the line. We'd like to schedule a time to speak with you. We have some questions about financial irregularities that occurred before the transfer. Would you be available to come to our office tomorrow morning? I met with the federal agents the next day. They asked me detailed questions about the business, the financial structure, who had access to accounts. When I first became aware of discrepancies, I answered everything honestly. I told them about hiring Celeste, about discovering the affair, about Quinlan's forensic audit. I provided them with copies of every document Quinlan had uncovered, every faked invoice, every suspicious transaction. The agents took notes, asked follow-up questions, and thanked me for my cooperation. One of them, a woman named Agent Chen, walked me out at the end of the interview. Mrs. Ashford, she said, her tone professional but not unkind, I want you to know that we take financial crimes very seriously. Based on the evidence you've provided and our own preliminary investigation, we'll be moving forward with charges. Your ex-husband and his business partner will both be facing federal indictments for wire fraud, embezzlement, and tax evasion. I nodded, trying to keep my expression neutral. Thank you, I said quietly. Agent Chen studied me for a moment. I've been doing this job for 15 years, she said, and I can always tell when someone is a victim and when someone is a perpetrator. You were a victim here, I hope you know that. You didn't do anything wrong. Her words hit me harder than I expected. For weeks, I had been so focused on the plan, on the strategy, on making sure everything went exactly right, that I hadn't really processed what had happened to me. I had been betrayed by the person I loved most. I had been robbed by people I trusted. My life's work had been contaminated by greed and lies, and now, standing in the hallway of a federal building, talking to a stranger who somehow understood what I had been through, it all came crashing down. I felt tears prick at the corners of my eyes, but I blinked them back. Thank you, I said again. The indictments came down 3 days later. I wasn't there when it happened, but Greer called me immediately to fill me in on the details. Federal agents had shown up at the Ember and Company offices early in the morning, armed with search warrants and subpoenas. They seized computers, files, financial records, everything. Trenton and Celeste were both taken in for questioning. By that afternoon, Both had been formally charged with multiple counts of wire fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy to commit tax evasion. The news spread quickly. Within hours, it was all over the local business websites and social media. Former marketing executive and business partner, charged in $500,000 embezzlement scheme. The articles detailed the charges, the investigation, and the offshore accounts. Some of them mentioned me, explaining that I had been the original owner of the company, but had transferred ownership shortly before the charges were filed. A few even framed me as another victim of the scheme, which wasn't entirely wrong. My phone exploded with calls and messages, former clients reaching out to express shock and support, friends and acquaintances who had heard the news and wanted to check on me. Even a few reporters asking for interviews. I ignored most of them, but there was one call I couldn't ignore. It came from Trenton, 2 days after the indictments. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. His voice was frantic, desperate, nothing like the confident man who had sat across from me in mediation. "Viv, you have to help me," he said, the words tumbling out in a rush. "This is insane. They're saying I stole money. They're saying I committed fraud. But you know that's not true. You know I would never do something like that. Tell them this is a mistake." I stayed silent for a moment, letting his words hang in the air. "Trenton," I said finally, my voice calm and even. "I didn't steal anything. You did, you and Celeste, and now you have to face the consequences." There was a long pause, then his voice changed, the desperation morphing into anger. "You knew," he said, the realization hitting him. "You knew about all of this. That's why you gave me the business. You set me up." I almost laughed. "I didn't set you up, Trenton. You set yourself up. I just let you take credit for your own work." He started yelling then, screaming about betrayal and revenge and how I had destroyed his life. I let him rant for a few seconds, and then I quietly hung up. That was the last time I ever spoke to Trenton Ashford. The legal proceedings dragged on for months. Celeste's lawyer tried to negotiate a plea deal, but the evidence against her was overwhelming. She eventually pleaded guilty to multiple counts and was sentenced to 6 years in federal prison. Trenton tried to fight the charges, claiming he had no knowledge of what Celeste was doing, that he was just as much a victim as anyone else. But the paper trail told a different story. His signatures were on the fake invoices. His name was on the offshore account transfers. He had approved payments that went nowhere, had signed off on financial reports that were completely falsified. The jury didn't buy his innocent act. He was found guilty on all counts and sentenced to 8 years. By the time everything was settled, both of them had lost everything. The house, the cars, the savings, all of it was seized to pay restitution to the clients they had defrauded. As for me, I walked away with nothing material, but I walked away free. The federal investigation cleared me completely. Agent Chen was right. I had been a victim, manipulated and betrayed by people I trusted. But I had also been smart enough to protect myself when it mattered most. In the months that followed, I started to rebuild. I launched a new agency called Phoenix Creative Studio, named for the idea of rising from the ashes of what was destroyed. I reached out to some of my old clients, the ones who had stuck by me through the scandal, and slowly began taking on projects again. It wasn't easy. There were days when I doubted myself, when I wondered if I could ever trust anyone again, when the weight of everything that had happened felt too heavy to carry. But I kept going. One day at a time, one project at a time, one small victory at a time. Bryn was my rock through all of it. She helped me find a new apartment, helped me set up the new business, reminded me on the hard days that I was stronger than I thought. "You survived this, Viv," she would tell me. "You didn't just survive, you won. And you did it on your own terms." She was right. I had won, but not in the way Trenton thought winning looked. I hadn't taken everything from him out of spite or revenge. I had simply let him face the consequences of his own actions. I had let the truth come to light, and in doing so, I had freed myself from a life built on lies. It's been 2 years since that final hearing, 2 years since I signed those papers and walked out of that courtroom with nothing. Phoenix Creative Studio is thriving now. I have a small team of incredibly talented people who share my vision and my values. We work with clients who appreciate creativity and honesty, who understand that good work takes time and care. I'm proud of what we're building together. But more than that, I'm proud of who I've become. I'm no longer the woman who ignored her instincts to keep the peace. I'm no longer the person who lets someone else take credit for her work just to avoid conflict. I learned that sometimes the strongest thing you can do is let someone else think they've won, and then watch as they realize they were playing a losing game all along. People ask me sometimes if I regret any of it, if I wish I had fought Trenton differently, if I wish I had exposed the fraud earlier, if I wish I had never met him at all. And the truth is, I don't regret any of it. Not the marriage, not the betrayal, not even the painful process of watching my old life crumble. Because all of it, every hard moment, every devastating discovery, every choice I made brought me to where I am now. And where I am now is exactly where I'm supposed to be, building something real, surrounded by people who genuinely care. Living a life that's mine. On my terms, with no one to answer to but myself. So to anyone listening to this story, anyone who has ever felt betrayed or underestimated or pushed aside, I want you to know something. You are stronger than you think. You are capable of more than you realize. And sometimes, the best revenge isn't taking everything from someone else. It's letting them take what they think they want, and watching as they discover it was never worth having in the first place. My husband took everything in the divorce, but what he didn't know, what he couldn't have known, was that in taking everything, he took exactly what he deserved. Nothing but consequences. Now I want to ask you something. How would you feel if this happened to you? If someone you loved and trusted betrayed you in the deepest way possible? Would you have fought back immediately, or would you have had the patience to let justice unfold on its own terms? Think about that. Think about the people in your life you trust, and ask yourself if you're really seeing them clearly, or if you're just seeing what you want to see. Leave your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear how you would handle a situation like this. And if this story touched you, if it made you think or feel or see something differently, subscribe for more timeless stories that will touch your heart and keep you thinking long after the video ends. Thank you for listening.